Greetings, viewers, and welcome to another spine-tingling episode of Roll Off a Tangent. I'm Robert Gibson, alias Sendexor, and my co-hosts are Nikki Zuev and XJ. This time our offering is a discussion of H.P. Lovecraft's ever-popular novelette, The Dunwich Horror. If you haven't read this gem, my advice is drop everything and read it. If, on the other hand, you're spoiler proof, I'll give you a shortened adaptation of the summary in. Just let me fetch it for a moment.
We're ready, don't worry, audience. This was all planned,
Yes, as I
part
was
of the
saying,
experience.
a shortened summary of L. Sprague de Camp's summary in his excellent biography of Lovecraft. Right, the story centres on the decadent Massachusetts village of Dunwich and the singularly off-putting Whateley family. Old Wizard Whateley owns a battered copy of the devilish book, the Necronomicon. I can't show you that one because I haven't got a copy myself. His daughter Lavinia, a deformed albino woman, accompanies him twice a year on Halloween and May Day to a stone circle in the hills, a kind of mini Stonehenge, attributed to the Native Americans, to perform nameless rites. Mysterious thunder-like noises are heard from the hilltop at such times, and 9 months after one such occasion, Lavinia gives birth to a son, Wilbur, by an unknown father. Compared to his relations, the repulsively chinless Wilbur turns out to be even less of a credit to the family than they are. Unnaturally precocious, reaching a man's size and maturity at the age of 10, he gets panicky if there's any chance of his clothing being disarranged, so that one gets to wonder what's underneath. Another cause of unease is the work which old Whateley is doing to the house. He is converting the upper story, and then the entire house, into a kind of pen. Meanwhile, his cattle keep vanishing, but he keeps buying more, and one wonders what happens to them. Eventually, old Whateley dies and Lavinia disappears, leaving the boy Wilbur as sole heir. Wilbur, now 8 feet tall and highly learned in forbidden occult subjects, takes his imperfect copy of the Necronomicon to the library of Miskatonic University at Arkham to compare it with the Latin version kept there under lock and key. He's allowed to look at it, but not to take it home for study. And as he looks at it, the librarian, the septuagenarian Dr. Armitage, notes the passage he's consulting and, fortunately for the world, soon intuits that whatever Wilbur Whateley may be, he's something that must be stopped. Armitage then warns other libraries, including Harvard, not to let Wilbur examine their collections. Some months later, and now desperate to steal the book, Wilbur returns to Arkham and breaks into the library. But he's attacked by the watchdog, which mortally wounds him and rips at his clothes. When Armitage and 2 other professors reach the scene, they see what's revealed beneath the torn garments. Below the waist, Wilbur is covered with black fur. He has legs like a flesh-eating dinosaur, an eye on each hip, and a tail. A score of tentacles with blood-sucking mouths protrude from his belly. When he dies, he dissolves into a puddle of fetid slime. In short, despite his human mother, he was hardly human. And according to the research carried out by Dr. Armitage, Wilbur Whateley, had he lived, would in some way have enabled the great old ones to return, strip the Earth of organic life, and drag the entire planet away to some other dimension. But as Wilbur dies, this frightful peril dies with him. However, what he leaves behind him is quite bad enough, in the form of the mysterious thing in the hollowed-out Whateley house. Without Wilbur to feed it, the thing breaks out and starts ravaging the country around it. The scene shifts to the community of Dunwich as the invisible rampaging monster stamps houses flat and devours cattle and people. Dr. Armitage and two intrepid fellow professors track the horror to the hill with the stone circle. There, for a brief moment, thanks to their researchers in the occult, they are able to make the creature visible by squirting a specially concocted powder onto it. And then they cause the thing to disappear by means of the right incantation. But as they do so, an eerie prophecy made by old wizard Whateley is fulfilled. And the final comment in the story tells us what and who the Dunwich horror actually was. Now, I think this is an absolutely terrific story. I'm looking forward to seeing what my colleagues think of it. I would just like to make one historical observation before I turn over to them, and that is that presumably compulsory schooling wasn't in force in 1920s Massachusetts, because I'm pretty sure that Wilbur would have caused undue comment in the classroom if there had been. Anyway, over to my colleagues. Who would like to take up the topic?
XJ?
XJ?
Oh, you're starting with me. Okay. The story has no pacing. I find it has no pacing. The phrase "wall of text" is invented to describe this stories like this, I think.
Phrase, sorry.
The phrase "wall of text" is invented to describe stories like this. Let's see. So first of all, the description is very good. Like the sentences are well constructed. They are very beautifully rendered, and you can absolutely feel the atmosphere leaking out from every paragraph.
Oh, what a way to phrase it, XJ. All right, continue.
Yeah, well, I mean, just keeping in theme with the horror story we are examining today, really. But, and I don't know if this is something that Lovecraft was shooting for. Everything felt really claustrophobic. Like the way the story start, like the description of the first few paragraphs of the area itself just felt really claustrophobic. And then just because of how dense everything is, the entire story felt claustrophobic. And I'm not sure if that's the atmosphere that Lovecraft was shooting for. Yeah, if that is the case, then it worked tremendously well because it came out very strongly. The reason I say it has no pacing because the beginning was really long. It took a long time to get to. It took quite a while to get to. There was a very long period. There was a very going into the life, the origins of Wilbur. It was a very long stretch of just narrating, and then the final moments of Wilbur was very short. It happened off screen even. Like we didn't even get to see what exactly happened when the dogs tore him apart. And even after that, because the Dunwich horror was actually something else, there was another section which again dragged quite a bit before we finally got to the ravine where the horror itself had escaped to or traveled to. And yeah, I just found it difficult to. I mean, this isn't the first time I've read the story, and it didn't become easier to push through the second time around, I have to say. And I'm also going to be honest and say that there is another story very much like the Dunwich horror, and I keep getting it mixed up. I think I don't know why, but the story is the one about the fish people. I can't. What is it?
The Shadow over Innsmouth.
Yes, the shadow over Innsmouth. I don't know why in my mind it keeps overlapping each other.
Well, they both begin with the word "the." It's the only thing I can think of.
Well, actually, you've just been destroyed, I think, right there with that. That is amazing.
I mean, so, how do I say this? There are certain things I absolutely admire about it. Like the description is very, very good. Like right from the start, you could feel just how oppressive Dunwich is. And I really like the visual description of Wilbur, which because
you mean when he dies?
When he dies, and we finally got to know what he's like, right? It's really quite good. It's very visual. It's very Lovecraft did not shy away from describing Wilbur, and it wasn't because here's the thing, right? In the beginning, there was a lot of hints about blood sucking, and it's leading up to something quite vampiric, and then in the end, we find out actually Wilbur's not really a vampire. He just has blood sucking tentacles protruding from his belly, which is very, very unique, very, very different from all of the very I can't pronounce this word.
Anthropomorphic
monsters that we have had up to this point, right?
You mean on the podcast?
Not in the podcast. I think in general, because you think about all the monsters we've had, they're all. Sorry, you were gonna say something?
Had where?
Huh?
What do you mean by we had?
I think XJ means in literature in general.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
In literature in general, a lot of the monsters we have are kind of based off on animals that we see on Earth, whereas Wilbur is completely different. And I would say probably visually speaking, at that time, is probably quite groundbreaking. He's got eyes on each side of his hips. Even the tail slightly different, and then when we finally get to the actual Dunwich horror itself, it is also quite alien, very, very alien. And so for that, I give very high marks for, because it's very original, I feel. But the story itself was quite difficult to push through, for me anyway. All right, well, enough of my penning. Over to you, Nikki. Tell us how much you love the story.
I mean, all right. So let's talk about this. So first of all, sorry for the brain fart. I really didn't understand who you were talking about. Like we've had, I'm like, is he talking about his concept artist buddies or like what? So my apologies. But with that out of the way, this story attempts something insurmountable, gigantic, and very daring, and that is it wants to talk about 17 years worth in a page count that's less than 40, and that is a very hard task to achieve, right? So from the get-go, and as the viewers might have noticed, yes, I am wearing this cultist like appeal tonight, for the Lovecraft crown, for sure. I do like his stories. Yeah, but that is not to say that I enjoyed or not enjoyed the story, right? Don't get fooled by my outfit. I would say that out of all stories that I've ever read, which had this amount of page count and had such a high aspiration, this one does it the best. Okay, so it is a very hard thing that H.P. Lovecraft has tried to achieve. The story for me is the best in the beginning, actually, because we are very slow and we get into a lot of details about Wilbur's daily life, and that's very fascinating because the tension slowly builds as to what is this creature exactly. What has this old man done? Why has he called to Yog-Sothoth to create this being? Where is this all going? What is the master plan, right? And I think the audience ultimately gets robbed in the end when it comes to Wilbur, because Wilbur dies, and all the questions are answered posthumously when it comes to Wilbur. I would have preferred a confrontation or something along those lines, but we can come back to that. That does not deter to the story. Just because one beat of the story doesn't work doesn't mean that the story itself, cannot be salvaged. And in a sense, when I read this the first time, when I was 15 years of age, I didn't even care about that. I was like, oh my god, what does this thing look like? Wow, we're actually getting full description this time, H.P. Lovecraft. You're finally not being lazy and just being like, it is an insurmountable horror that's impossible to understand. He's like, no, it has octopus things that can suck your blood. You're like, finally, awesome. This is creepy as hell, right? This is what we want, H.P. Lovecraft. Thank you very much. Right, and we move on to a powerful, dastardly plot in which the end of the world has been averted, but the end of Dunwich has not. And this whole sequence is also amazing. It's also really well written. The tension is palpable. The way this entire end battle is structured is amazingly done. Done in a way where H.P. Lovecraft does his thing where you don't get to see all of it in a very clever way, as the frightened townfolk are now the focus, and the only way they can keep up with what's going on is with a telescope, one that zooms in too frighteningly, in too much detail, to the point where one of them almost goes mad from seeing what he sees. Right? What a fantastic way to juxtapose the scene. Beautifully written and amazingly set up by H.P. Lovecraft. So, do I like the story? Do I hate the story? I mean, it's hard to say because I've said like both negative things and both positive things. Let me put it this way. H.P. Lovecraft is a master of his craft for a reason. And you can see it in Dunwich Horror. You can see how this man is capable of creating things that most of his contemporaries simply could not. And for that, he must be admired. if I had to, yeah, Robert, I see that you want to say something, or
No,
no,
I'm
okay.
listening with rapt attention.
Oh, first time in a long time. I am mostly boring, so and the crux of the matter for me comes to the middle. I think the middle is where most of my tiny misgivings are created and squashed, but they are created, right? So, in my opinion, the story is flawless up until the middle, and then it becomes flawless again, right? So it's very hard for me to judge it because I really like the beginning and I really like the ending, but it's just that meander in the middle where we switch gears from pacing. I think it could have had a little bit more oil on it, you know, a little bit more on the gears, and then it would flow even better. Because let's look at XJ's critique. I think it's a very valid critique. This part is slow. I don't like this part because it's slow, and then it goes way faster, and I like the fast part, right? And I think, and again, actually can disagree with me after I make my claims. More than happy to debate. I think if the transition between the slow and the fast was seamless, or at least was done in a better way, you would not have that complaint. If the middle was better paced, this wall of text feeling would dissipate because you would go through a gradual climb instead of, you know, at the end.
That's actually not my complaint. So when I say it doesn't have pacing, what I mean is it's quite flat all the way through for me.
Explain what do you mean by flat, if you could?
So when you the only way I can really explain this is through music.
Okay.
And so I'm sure everyone is familiar with Canon in D by Paco Bell. And then so it's a canon. It's like four people playing the same song, almost the same song, but each one starts just like half a bar later. So what you find in canon in D is you start off very slow, and then the middle becomes extremely intense because everything, all the instruments starts playing at the same time, and it hits like a certain level of complexity. So during that portion is extremely intense, and then it slows down towards the end and after. So when I talk about pacing, what I mean is there's like this for the listeners, what I'm actually doing with my hands is I'm squishing it and then I'm pulling it apart, and there's variation in the speed of the story. It doesn't necessarily have to follow like a ramp or anything like that.
You're saying it was monotone.
It was
going at the same. It was going at the same speed the entire time, and that's why you didn't like it.
Yes, and it isn't so much the. So first of all, like the biggest part where it fell flat for me was the fact that Wilbur died off screen. It's like
that's one of my complaints as well. Yes.
Yeah, he died off screen, and to me,
he gets injured off screen, but he finally expires on screen, I think.
That's true. He expires on screen, but the killing blow was dealt like completely off screen. Nobody saw what happened, and I felt like that robbed the story of a potential high tension point. And the beginning of the story was very, very slow, which might have been and if there were beats inside within the beginning and the middle where the tension was spiked or lowered, even further. That would have made the stories more varied in terms of the its rhythm. And I think the other thing is that every paragraph is about the same length. And this is just me. I find if the paragraphs are varied in length and the sentences are varied in length, it also produces something like rhythm. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's actually my complaint. So everything had the same beat in time, so to speak.
Yeah, so I think I mistook your pacing for literal year by year going by rather than writing style pacing. So now I understand your complaint. So then let me continue with my analysis. The point for Wilbur's death that I think is quite interesting to talk about, and I'll talk about this point, and I'll pass to Robert to to hear what kind of thoughts he had about the story when he first read it, maybe, or actually 2 points of one more. But first point being Wilbur. So for him to die due to wounds he has suffered off screen, right? We'll phrase it this way. All right, Robert, Mr. Pedantic. Because of this situation, the gravitas of the moment is slightly less so. Now, if we had it so that Wilbur came back in the middle of the night into the, and broke into the library as the head librarian was studying late that night, and they tussled for the book, and in perchance in their fight, Wilbur fell down the stairs and then was assaulted by dogs. That is one very Lovecraftian, like not to have actual fights described in the story, but rather have circumstances, terrible eldritch circumstances, sort of like take something out, right? That would preserve that feeling, but it also would have way more. I don't want to say gravitas again, but gravitas, it's a good word. More gravitas to the entire situation. That honestly, if I could change anything, that's what I would change, and I would just leave everything else as it is. I mean, if that was my only choice, right? Fun trivia fact that I wanted to mention: this was published in Weird Tales in 1929 in April, and in this issue there was not just H.P. Lovecraft, but there was also Robert E. Howard and Clark Ashton Smith. All three of them were featured in this one issue. I think Clark Ashton Smith wrote Sonnet. So it was like a poem. And Robert E. Howard also had a poem submitted called, I have to look it up, I'm sorry, Moon Mockery. So all three of, the Titanic authors of the time were in the same issue in which Dunwich Horror was published. How amazing is that? All right, so Robert, tell us how you feel about the story.
I'll just pick up your point about the lack of a physical tussle between Dr. Armitage and Wilbur Whateley. If the thing had happened that way, none of us would be here now, because Wilbur, being 8 foot tall and quite strong, would easily have beaten the 70-year-old Armitage. He would have got the copy of the book and proceeded with his plans, by which, with the result that all life on Earth would have.
I mean, you could write it in that Armitage had dogs, right? He had a beautiful dog. That's why they fought. Then you know what? That's great. You make it a great sacrifice because the dog jumped on Wilbur, and they both tumbled down the stairs, and both the dog and Wilbur died. There you go. Fantastic. I'm amazing. You're welcome. Carry on. No, carry on, Robert.
All right. Well, I don't even think of things like this because you know how I react to stories. I just
You accept
accept
them.
everything.
Yeah, I knew you'd say that.
Yeah. Well, that's how I do it because a good story to me in my way of reacting to things reaches a certain tipping point after which nothing wrong with it gets noticed, or
Yeah.
if it does get noticed, my excuse making um, power goes into overdrive, and I think up excuses for it, and I think that's probably a sign of a good writer that he can make you make excuses for his stories. Anyway, I want to pick up another point that Nikki made about I think it was his early years of reading Lovecraft and his first reading of the Dunwich Horror, thinking, oh, at last H.P. Lovecraft has actually described one of his monsters. Well, actually, I think this is a legend about his fiction that he doesn't describe his monsters. Maybe he starts out that way, but in three of his best stories, apart from the one we're discussing, three of his other best stories, The Shadow over Innsmouth, The Shadow Out of Time, and At the Mountains of Madness, they are all masterpieces and they all contain as full a description as of the monsters that you could possibly wish for. So in his mature period, he does shine the full light of day on his ghastly creations.
I completely
Um,
agree, but those are the exceptions to the rules that you
mm,
rattled out rather than hit. And it's also, you correctly stated that it is because of his seniority. The more
mm,
senior he got with his writing style, the more comfortable he was describing the actual horrors. So that is
mm.
definitely true.
Yeah. Well, one I think of his most senior stories, as you call them, as the representative ones, because they are where his talent goes into full bloom. Um, Now, the other thing I'd like to say about the Dunwich Horror is that I think he writes better than he well does than he does almost anywhere else in this story. There's not much of the usual Lovecraft uh,
Jibber jabber.
unnecessary verbosity. I
Yep.
just like to say, point out one of the things that this story, uh, something typical about it, uh, and it says after Wilbur's visit to the library at Arkham, his first visit, and Armitage refusing to allow him to take the book home. And it says then that Armitage studied Whateley's gorilla-like lope as he crossed the bit of campus visible from the window. It's just a very small snippet, but the story is full of things like that, uh, uh, little fragments of vision that stick in the mind. It's full of phrases that stick in the mind.
I
And
agree with that. I think that's something that a lot of authors try to do, but none of them do it as well as Lovecraft does.
mm, and I think that despite what XJ said about the pacing, which I would say I would call it the tone. Actually, I would say any writer has his own tone, and you can say it's monotonous if you like, but that just means that H.P. Lovecraft remains H.P. Lovecraft throughout the story because that's who he is. And I think the tone is basically it's like reportage, but not quite as stand back as the Call of Cthulhu, which we discussed some months ago. This is reportage, but it's a bit more um, kind of immediate, if you like. I would say so. There's not perhaps not much in it, but
Well,
anyway, you
yeah, go on.
expect it. You expect it to be the same tone throughout. In fact, it would, to me, it would strike the wrong note if it suddenly changed in tone.
But it does change in tone, doesn't it?
Well, it's not in the way that XJ wanted it to, I don't think.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want Lovecraft to change the way he writes or anything like that, but okay, so I found the Call of Cthulhu to be a lot more readable than the Dunwich horror.
Golly, I'm surprised.
Yeah. I did found it much more enjoyable than the Dunwich horror, actually. And I think there's just much more variation in it. Not just in... Because the Call of Cthulhu had more than one set piece, whereas Dunwich horror just kind of happens within Dunwich itself, and the only change in scenery is the library
Arkham.
at Arkham. I mean, all of this, I'm not doing a great job of explaining what I mean by pacing and rhythm, but it's really just like changing things around, and there's just not a lot of changes in the Dunwich horror. And you know, like to riff off your observation about beautifully constructed sentences, I once wrote something which
That's good.
I
Sorry,
feel
I thought that was it.
I littered every sentence with as powerful imagery as I possibly could, you know, to the best of my ability. Every sentence, every paragraph was something you could quite feel. You could feel yourself in it. And then I brought it to some friends, and I asked them to read it, and I was there in front of them, and I watched them lose interest. Like I was sitting there and I could see their eyes flicker away, and then they went back and read it, and I was thinking to myself, okay, that's a very interesting reaction. And it's like I go back to that example I always use, where you have a black canvas and then you have a white dot. What does your eye see? The white dot. And if it's a white canvas and a black dot, what do you see? It's the black dot. It's not the color. It's how much of a color there is relative to another color. Like the contrast, there's not enough contrast in the Dunwich horror for me.
Too much of anything can make you sick, even if it's candy.
Yeah, too much sugar, man. It's like eating a cake that's too rich.
I see what you mean. I don't find it this way. In fact, I find it quite refreshing, because most H.P. Lovecraft stories are they take place in first-person perspective, and here we stick to third person most of the time, if not all of the time, and that is quite enjoyable for me, at least to my memory. A lot of the H.P. Lovecraft stories that I've read, because I haven't read all of them, most of the ones I've read were in first person. So the fact that this one is in third person was a good change for me. And I think actually H.P. Lovecraft shines better in third person. And it's, I can never know what XG is going to think. Because I thought he's going to be like, whoa, this is vividly imaginative writing. There's so much description. There's so much imagery thrown in front of us. It's all so gothic and existential and interesting, and all of these monsters are fascinating. I thought he was going to be like, this is awesome.
But I did say I like the monster part.
No, yeah, I'm not.
Come on, man.
I'm not saying you shit on the story. I'm saying that you. I thought your feedback would just be like, this is a visual artist's dream.
I mean,
every scene could be drawn.
I mean, it's true, but you kind of want to. Well, I think I will take back my words. You it's not you kind of want to, but to me anyway, it's like when it comes to horror, especially, some parts must be left to the reader's imagination. As much of it, no, because horror lives inside the person's mind. No one can scare yourself as much as you can.
So you think too much was revealed? Instead of
no, the monster revelation was good. Okay. But so first of all, I wouldn't say that he reviewed Lovecraft reviewed too much. There are a lot of things that he did not review, which actually turns out to be more creepy, like the those birds. What are they? Whippoorwills?
Whippoorwills,
yeah.
Like so that's one creepy thing about the whole story. Like, obviously the whippoorwills are a completely different force from the forces that the Whateleys worship. The Yog-Sothoth and the old ones, the old ones. They're completely. It comes across very strongly that the whippoorwills are like a completely different force. They belong to a separate force, and actually that one sparked my imagination, and I was wondering, what are the whippoorwills? What do they represent? And I really like the fact that Lovecraft took on the challenge of describing Wilbur and the Dunwich horror, and he didn't fall flat in that, in my opinion. But to describe the entire scenery around Dunwich to such an extent, you would have to read it to understand what I'm saying, and you guys have read it, but it's very, very detailed. It's very detailed. And I did wish there were certain parts of it where he left blank, or at least just a suggestion of it, because it builds the creepiness. Like going back to The Ring, part of the reason why the Japanese version of The Ring worked so well is because it didn't try to explain everything. Yeah.
Well, this story doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain what the heck Yog-Sothoth is, for one thing, and what the old ones are. And
I used the wrong word. Describe everything.
Oh.
All right. So, my dear friends, we are on quite a precipice. I feel like I'm sitting in the middle of a,
you are occupying the seat that Rob usually takes.
Well, no, because I'm like in the middle on the story. I'm like, it's good, but it's not fantastic, right? And you're like, yeah, man, it could have been way better. And then Rob is in his usual position.
Okay. Let me correct that. It's not that I think that the story is bad. I think there are some people who would really like the story. It just didn't work that well for me because for me, for whatever reason, that I cannot actually really. I mean, I gave my reasons, but I found it difficult to push through the story. Yeah, there were times, and I cannot just pretend that it didn't happen. There were times when I really wanted to just skip several paragraphs, and in fact, I did several paragraphs. I was like, oh my god, this is too much, and then I skipped. Especially there were certain sections where Lovecraft started talking about he was writing about the sermon that the preacher did, like early in the beginning of the story, near the beginning.
Yeah.
I skipped that
And you
one.
skipped that?
I skipped that one.
What?
I was like,
You're ridiculous.
I was like,
This is one of the most fascinating parts.
I couldn't get through it. Although, having said that, I actually really like the diary entries of Wilbur. And that was properly cryptic. I feel that was like, oh my god, that is weird as hell. Like, because it is written like a madman had written it. I can't.
On my memory. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I can't remember. I don't have it. I don't have the story in front of me, so I can't pull out a passage. But it's really weird. You can sort of grasp what he's talking about, but it's phrased in such a weird way.
If you have my annotated Lovecraft here,
Look at that.
it's got the text of the stories and it's got notes in the margins.
Ooh.
Explaining these references, like with Wilbur's diary, when he says, what is it? He says something like, learnt the Aklo from the Sabaoth, and explains what the Aklo is and so on. So, pretty good. I mean, this book is really something. It's almost like having the Necronomicon.
Oh well, man, it's I don't know if anybody is watching, but that book is thick.
Yeah. That's another thing. It builds up your muscles every time you lift it up.
That's perfect for a sedentary person like me. Yeah.
All right.
But
So this might be one of the first, if not the first, suggestions that Robert has made, and you didn't like Rob. Actually, I think this is one of the first short stories. Yeah. I'm not sure. I can't remember any other ones where you had such strong disagreements with us.
I wouldn't say I hate the story or anything. Like, I
didn't say that.
I don't dislike this story as much as I do the Snows of Kilimanjaro, for instance.
Yeah, but that's
or the hero,
like, terrible.
Or the hero.
Yeah, and that was my suggestion.
Yeah,
I'm talking about Roberts, right? And I said disagreements. I did not say you didn't like.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
because Rob's taste is very aligned with mine in most circumstances.
To my defense, the hero, when I was suggesting the hero, I knew it was not that great. This was one of the first.
Fair enough.
Anyway, sorry, go on.
Fair enough. But because Rob and I both appreciate atmosphere and world building a lot more than we do character building, shall we say?
Well, I think that the world building comes first, and the atmosphere and the scene come first.
Same.
But that means actually that I don't really understand why you think that there's too much, that the story is too slow at the beginning, because I absolutely revel in the slow build-up of horror stories like this. The description of Dunwich and so on, I just lap it all up. And,
like I said, it's not that the beginning is. It's not that I don't appreciate the slow beginning. It's just that there's no change in that pace.
Okay, I think we're going over the same points.
Yeah, it's not that it's long and slow. It's just that for me it remained long and slow for the entire story.
So Robert, if I had to put a gun to your head, I mean, I would. If I put a gun to your head and said, right, Mr. Gibson, You gotta change one thing about Dunwich horror. You have no choice. You can't tell me, "Oh, but I love it so much." Like, I'm gonna shoot you if you say that, right? You have to change one thing. What are you changing?
I think I'd make it 3 times as long.
That's not a change. That's a cop out. Unacceptable answer. You're shot.
Oh my god. Well, 3 times as long. I don't know, man.
I think I would actually not like the story if it was 3 times as long, Robert. I mean, what more could you add? What would be 3? You know, if it's 3 times as long, where are we going?
That's
what's
a
more
good.
to
That's a
describe?
good question. What would you add?
Well, yeah, you could talk about. You could have a long bit about Wilbur's visit to Harvard University, for example. That might be quite interesting. Then the people of is it in Boston? People of Boston seeing this 8-foot tall chappie strolling through the streets, and maybe the cops would start getting interested. And
That's adding something that you wanted, actually. More diversity in the story would be different locales, different situations.
Well,
maybe you'd like it more.
Well, if he's gonna do the same thing though, which is go into the library to borrow a book and then get rebuffed.
Right. But I think the way Robert has suggested it, like there would be like a police report, and people try and chase him down after they saw him.
That
He's
would
the
have
strange dude.
that would have changed things up tremendously. So so one of the things that I felt would have because when I was reading it, I was like, man, if only this thing was actually described, was when in the diary section Wilbur said he shot some guy's dog.
Yeah, I found the passage that you were talking about. It says shot Elam Hutchins. Collie Jack when he went to bite me, and Elam says he would kill me if he dashed. I guess he won't.
Yeah, that I was like, man,
creepy.
there's so much there just in those 2 sentences, right? And I was like,
I usually put on. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was like, so instead of just saying Lavinia wanders the hills and then her son follows him, and then repeating that multiple times, what if Lovecraft had just described one of Wilbur's rambling with the dog and then shooting it? It's not quite. I mean, it would change the story tremendously in the sense that I think what Lovecraft is trying to achieve here is he tries to keep everything a mystery until the end, where he goes like, whoop, show, here's the thing, like kind of like a circus guy who builds up the mystery and the mystique, and then throwing open the curtains at last to wow everyone.
Right, but you could do that, and you could also keep the suspense and keep it interesting. Just like, for example, Robert's suggestion. If I am to add on to it, I think even more greater you could add. If you were to make this longer, you would make the Necronomicon the final piece that this guy needs to get. And so he's going to Boston for something else, and he's going to Sydney for something else, and there could be even an entire passage where he visits the pyramids, and we see ancient carvings of Yog-Sothoth, and we get just a little description of some tentacles going about, like right before it cuts to him, sort of like killing his his guide in the pyramid, like climbing the walls and crap.
I mean, I wouldn't pretend to make suggestions that would be very Lovecraftian and the way he writes, because everything I can think up of is a bit actiony. So there would be some pew pews in there,
But if you can, he had pew pews. He just described it in a Lovecraftian way. Let's put it.
I mean, fair enough, right? It's just like almost all of it is off screen. But I would very much have wanted something like the Call of Cthulhu, where there is there is I'm trying to recall the Call of Cthulhu. It starts off with the description, the inheritance of this guy of a text, and then he goes off to investigate mad ramblings of an artist, and then there was a expedition funded. No, not an expedition funded. That came later. There was a description of a boat trip by a bunch of guys, sailors,
Yeah.
and then this bunch of sailors went mad, and then the protagonist, I think, actually, did he ever fund no, there was no trip taken by the protagonist, except at the end when he was it no
There isn't really a protagonist in the Call of Cthulhu. There's several reports from different sources.
Yeah, so there are changes, you know. We don't just stick to one long report. We change our viewpoints. We follow different characters.
Yeah.
We do different things. And to me, the really the high point of the Call of Cthulhu was the boat trip to find Cthulhu himself. That was amazing.
Yes, go on, Robert.
Well, yeah, no, I agree. That is the high point of that story. I wouldn't have thought, though, that the Dunwich horror is exactly lacking in variation and incident. I mean, dash it all, you know, the rampage by the monster is an amazing piece of writing.
And the set piece at the end with the telescope, with them sort of like looking at what's going on and then sort of seeing parts of it. I think that is such a well written circumstance, and then scene following after the circumstance.
But before that, also the panic in the village and the reports of something invisible moving along and making trees and so on sway about, and the panicky telephoning and the in the party line, and it's all absolutely top-notch thrilling stuff.
I mean, to be honest, by the time I got to that point in the story, I had more or less lost interest. And I think I go back to Wilbur's mauling at the hands of the dogs, or the jaws of the dogs, happening off screen. I think that was the one point that really turned me off the story completely. Yeah, like if it hadn't happened that way, I think my interest in the story would have remained. Yeah, pretty much.
So, it's fascinating, because I think some of the things you said you skipped, to me, screams like XJ material writing. You know, like the fact that you skipped the ritual that the old man was performing.
That's not the part I skipped.
What you said, that's what
no, I'm
skipped.
talking about the passage where the preacher was describing certain things. It happened really early.
Well, of course, yeah. I was gonna ask you to describe it, but if you skipped it, can't describe it.
Yeah. No, it's it was talking about a preacher that was making a sermon who then disappeared after making that sermon.
Oh, about yeah. Okay.
It must be allowed that these blasphemies and an infernal train of demons are matters of too common knowledge to be denied. The cursed voices of Azazel and Buzrael, of Beelzebub and Belial, being heard now from underground by above a score of credible witnesses now living. I myself did not more than a fortnight ago catch a very plain discourse of evil powers in the hill behind my house, wherein there were a rattling and rolling, groaning, screeching, and hissing, such as no things of this earth could raise up, and
That is
which
the
must
one.
needs have come from those caves that only black magic can discover and only the devil unlock.
All right, so
I-
you can't skip it now, XJ. It's been read to you.
You underestimate my ability to switch off when I want to. But that was a passage.
Whoa, that's rude.
That was a
Yeah,
passage.
1747, the Reverend Abijah
That
Heralded.
that is the one. Whilst I admire the way it was written because it was very authentic. It was written in a very authentic way. I think people did write like that way back when, and it felt really authentic. But I was like, man, let me skip this, and I did.
Yeah.
I wonder what you think of The Case of Charles Dexter Ward. I don't know if you've read that one. It's Lovecraft's longest story. It's the only one of his stories that's really novel length.
I mean,
that has a lot of 18th century stuff in.
It would have been very difficult for me to get through, I think. Yeah. I mean, if it's all written like that, then it would have been difficult for me to get through. I also skipped a lot of the. I also skipped a lot of the dialogue. That Whateley, specifically the old Whateley, because it's written in a. It's written to imitate a certain accent, I think. And I was like, I don't understand half of this, so I skipped.
Well, that's because you're a foreigner, you see, XJ.
Yikes, Robert! Absolute yikes. All right, so moving swiftly on. There is a RPG called Call of Cthulhu, and what RPGs are role-playing games. If some of you don't know, tabletop RPGs, they're very popular right now. They are games in which you go through stories of one single person, the dungeon master or the game master or the horror master, as they probably would be in Call of Cthulhu, right? And the master acts as the writer, the author of the tale, and the other players act as characters in that tale, and they get to make choices and decisions within this. And if you took Call of Cthulhu, because I've played it a couple of times, it's basically a combination between Dunwich horror and the tale Call of Cthulhu. Most adventures that you go through take from these tales, and you can see why, because here in Dunwich horror, the heroes, the humans, actually fight back pretty well against the horror, right? Whereas in most of other H.P. Lovecraft stories, you don't get such a chance, including in Call of Cthulhu, right? Where the insurmountable odds of him awakening is inevitable, and the staving off the Armageddon is impossible. Whereas in Dunwich horror, the exact opposite happens. You stave away the inevitable.
That's a good point. Yeah. That's a good point. Because at the end of The Shadow over Innsmouth, for instance, there's the cheerful thought, it will be a greater city than Innsmouth next time.
Scary. So, to me, it kind of makes a lot of sense why a lot of people take pay homage to Dunwich horror, because it's one of the only H.P. Lovecraft stories that has a happy ending, so to speak.
Yeah.
What are these noises, actually? What are you trying to tell us?
I don't think it's a happy ending. I would call it a stalemate ending, which is probably the best you can have in
Well,
Lovecraft.
the end
in
of the world is averted.
The
The
Lovecraftian
creature-
in the Lovecraftian universe, probably a stalemate is the best thing you can hope for.
I mean, the crisis is averted, the creature is destroyed, and the end of the world is cancelled. How is that not a happy ending?
Temporarily.
Oh no, because Wilbur's dead.
No.
Yeah.
They're still out there.
No, what are you
Perhaps-
talking about?
Perhaps XJ means that some other.
Yeah,
some
but
other
that's not
people will
covered
get
by
back
the
in
story.
touch.
The story doesn't end with like, and there are other people outside who will still do this. Right? That's you just adding on to something.
Sure.
No, Mr. I skipped paragraphs.
Yeah,
Don't
I
even know
skipped
what the
it.
story
I'm
was
not,
about.
and I'm not even ashamed.
I'm not shaming you. I'm just saying like
I
you
don't.
know,
Yeah, I
maybe
skipped
you
it.
missed the crucial part. You don't know what
No,
you're
I
talking
didn't miss that part.
about. Which part? You don't even know what I'm talking about.
The end, right?
Well, no. I just said that at the end there is no what's it called? He doesn't say like, oh, and there will be more or something.
That's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
But Yog-Sothoth is still out there, right? Anyway,
Sure.
we're coming up to, we passed an hour of this very contentious episode where we are not all united in our hatred towards a story like in the snows of Kilimanjaro, and I don't think I'll ever stop making fun of that story. Any last thoughts?
Now you're stealing my memes. Right. My last thought is this is a solid story. I would give it an 8.5 out of 10 because I do see some places in which it can be improved. But Lovecraftian parts that could be improved can compare basically to no one. When it comes to improvement of other stories. So H.P. Lovecraft trying to improve something, it's already a high standard that we're working with, So it's, you have to take it with a grain of salt. It is still very masterfully written.
And Robert, 20 out of 10.
Yeah, I wouldn't change a single word of it, actually. Quite honestly, I mean that. I wouldn't change a word of it. That's not true of all of Lovecraft's stories, needless to say. Some of them are pretty terrible, the early ones. But this one, no, I think he got it just right.
So 10 out of 10? All right.
I thought you were gonna give it 20 out of 10.
No, it's not that good. Just 10 out of 10.
As a mathematician, I am preparing to roll in my grave.
Instead of,
Not there yet.
yeah. Well, as for me, I think I find it very difficult to give it a score. Objectively, it is a very well written story, except for the lack of pacing. But I just didn't enjoy it. Yeah. Well, okay. So that's the end of the Dunwich horror discussion, and we have come to the end of this podcast. And if you guys enjoyed the discussion, please like and subscribe and all the jazz. In the meantime, have a great week ahead.
Take care, everyone.